these various buckets, and a nice way to think about coordination in trying to get it going helped us to put things into these categories. And what's interesting is your structures and your approach are often quite different in respond and recover, for example, than it is in prevent. So that's why we use this model. So that's the first point I wanted to make. And if we move along, then the other thing to consider, or the next thing to consider, is obviously this idea that you got the various levels of coordination. I know it seems obvious, and you're probably thinking, well, this is kind of cyber resilience 101, but it does help to sit down and ask yourself, what have I got going at these various levels? So the first aspect is obviously within your company enterprise, or in our case, a central bank. And we're not that big of an institution, so it's probably a little bit easier, but we also got quite a number of role players, and we'll get to that a little bit later in terms of the cyber coordination and how do we even coordinate amongst ourselves to be able then to plug into the wider ecosystem. Then you can think around industry or sector. So this idea around banking sectors, insurers, and so on. And when I speak a little about the South African context a little later, you will see why this is quite important, because we've actually organized ourselves quite nicely around these sector ideas. And it does help for insurers, for instance, to talk to each other. Then if you move up to national level, there's two things at play here. It's this idea of financial stability and oversight and prudential authority. And then the other thing that plays in is your national structures. And we've had some of the speakers speak around that today, but it's important to think about how you're going to bring that coordination together. And then as the SARB, we do operate a payment system across the SADC region, so in other words, Southern African region. And there is a couple of countries involved in interbank clearing and a settlement system across that. So for us, this need of regional coordination is quite strong. And then lastly, and this is why we're talking to each other today, and where the World Bank and these kind of institution fits in, is the international level. So it is important to think about it across those levels. Then if we move on, then I used the word dimensions. I don't know if that is quite correct, but it is interesting that when you start to talk coordination, there is kind of viewpoints or approaches. People have got certain things or a certain frame of reference when thinking about cyber coordination. And again, it's important to think across those levels. And I know I'm sort of building a complex picture, but then we'll pull it back a little later. We actually came up with what we think is quite a basic solution. But the idea is you got some critical infrastructure players. So this idea of financial stability and how do you connect all of that together, and not only financial, also your wider critical infrastructure. So your national levels and things like that. You probably want some coordination across there. The financial sector itself, that's obvious. So because you're a financial sector player, you want to look at coordination there. Financial market infrastructures, we get that very well. And that ecosystem also got kind of their own language and their own focuses around clearing windows and settlements and all kinds of things like that. And it's important to consider those operational things and pull and connect that to your cyber collaboration. Then the security aspect, and that's not just cyber information security, it's also physical security. You have to think, especially in the South African context, we've got a bit of legislation around what you need to do because you're a certain institution around security incidents, whether it's cyber or physical, around law enforcement and things like that. Then the privacy angle, I don't need to teach this audience around GDPR. Also got similar South African legislation. We're only starting to enforce that now from actually the end of next month. There's a lot of requirements that's very similar to GDPR that we need to pull in, but that information regulator also wants to do cyber or security or cyber resilience coordination. Then the fraud aspect, the idea that certain people think about things in terms of linked accounts and frauds and fraud operations and so on, and how do you pull that community into collaboration? Because they're often quite different from your cyber experts. And we sometimes miss each other talking across cyber fraud versus cyber resilience or cyber security. And it's important to connect that as well. Stability, I spoke around that already, the prudential oversight we get, and then lastly, payment systems being a particular context. All right, so hopefully that helps a little bit with dimensions. then if we move on a bit, so if you think about those dimensions and you think about the simple model I just introduced, the way we're starting to think about it, when you look at coordination and you look at prevent, I try to depict just on the right-hand side. You could do that at various levels of depth, and it is important to map kind of where you are as across those various levels, whether it's country, industry, and so on, in terms of what's the appropriate actions in terms of your maturity that you should aim for next. And we found this quite useful, that if you're sort of scratching the surface, you can get into things like common reference frameworks, and we have some chats around that, around our oversight function starting to produce some of those frameworks. If you get a little better, maybe you want to get some integrated or ongoing measurement going, and if you get a little more mature on the prevent side, maybe you want some coordinated and shared implementation, readiness testing, and assistance. So you actually want to actively get involved in helping each other around implementation. So that's kind of the levels you can think about coordination across prevent. Then if we move to the next slide, on the detect, same idea. So right, so you could get some high-level post-fact incident sharing groups going, lists going. What is interesting in the space, and one of the other speakers referred to that as well, is that trust is key. And often these informal groups and sharing groups often have a higher level of trust and earlier sharing. And it's important to try and get those groups to include more and be a little more open and try to formalize that. You can then go into selected information sharing at key points. So in other words, you can pick the specific areas or specific intervals around sharing, trying to formalize it a little more. And then the bottom there is actually where you want to go. You want to get into real-time early detection, where you share technical detail so openly and across the institutions. But if you're going to try and launch into that right away and you haven't even got some high-level posts and groups and post-incident sharing, you're probably going to struggle to dive straight into getting this integrated early detection open sharing model. Then if we move to respond and recover, and we spoke around the sharing groups and lists already a little bit, that's where you can start just to initiate some of those response and recover activities. And the reason it's not under detect is this is now once the incident has happened, right? Get the people to at least let each other know via groups, some notification via lists and so on. Then the middle is where we've found ourselves now a little bit. We've defined some of those minimum reporting requirements to our audience. Our prudential authorities issued some guidance in that space and so on. And the idea is then you define specific intervals or reporting that you need to do that you can then put potential information sharing, also the coordination when you do respond and recover. And then the last, sort of the bottom, and I guess there's more, I tend to oversimplify things, but the bottom part is you really want to get to integrated coordination and resource sharing. So in other words, when you have that big incident that's across multiple organizations, you need the formalized structures, but you also have that willingness to work together, that resource sharing, that helping each other out. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the discussion as well, around potential ways you could get cleverer around sharing of resources. Right, so if we move on to the next slide. So what have we done around this? There's probably a couple of structures I could have drawn, but again, I wanted to keep this relatively quick and simple today, just because of sort of the timing, but also don't want to flood you with information about our particular context necessarily. The idea is that you create some sort of collaboration structure, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same committee or the same set of people. That's one of the pennies that kind of started to drop to us when we spoke around, for instance, who's the people involved in that early detect information sharing versus who's the people that really want to, the governance people that really want to discuss prevent and standardization and cyber hygiene and things like that. And then also who's the people that's really involved when this incident has happened to help you with response coordination. And that coordination, if you remember, is then across multiple things. It's not just get the CISOs to talk to each other. It's how do you talk to your payment system operators? How do you talk to the various CISOs you got? How do you talk to the cyber people and so on? And how do you start to pull those things together? And what we've done just in terms of organizing ourselves a little, our prevent side is mostly driven by our prudential authority and our oversight area. And We pull them into that CRS at the top, stands for Cyber Resilience Subcommittee. We pull them into a coordination session that we hold at least once every 2 months, where we try and pull all these various activities together. In the South African space, we were pretty self-organizing until recently, so there's a lot of initiatives and work you want to pull in from the industries that you don't want to rebuild. And we've managed to establish this Cyber Resilience Subcommittee that pulls in all those dimensions we spoke around earlier into one room, all the regulators, all the dimensions, all the banks represented. And luckily they've organized themselves already, so you don't have to pull each individual bank in. You can pull in our industry bodies. In our case, it's SABREC and CISA and so on. But the point is, short-term insurers, long-term insurers, banks have already organized themselves, and we can pull them into these sessions. But that's really around then coordination. And what you try and do is you try and direct for a prevent side, so what do you need to do? On the detect side, you try and get proposals and threat intel flowing. And again, you don't try and plug that into your bi-monthly meeting. That's just silly. You create the structures underneath that. And we saw the presentation a little earlier around the European initiatives and the MISP and so on. And that's the type of platforms you look at. You must not discard the informal sharing groups. Like I said, try and pull them in. There's really rich information there. But that's this idea of how do you do threat intel, how do you consider proposals, and how do you then drive and coordinate some of those functions. And then the last bit, respond and recover. And that is it gets less into a willing buyer, willing seller type model, which you get more across your detect than some of your prevent. Because when an incident hits, you probably have to be fairly clear around how you're going to direct and interrelate and so on. And then you can obviously run and coordinate simulations and things like that. But that's basically how we've used the model. On the left-hand side, just to recap, our prudential authority mostly plays in the prevent space. The detect space is our internal function, so the function I look after, as well as our IT area. So we try and connect those threat intel groups and so on together. And again, it's not the same people. And then respond and recover. You really want to connect your SOCs, your operators, your system operators, and all those structures around payment infrastructures and so on together under respond and recover. So hopefully this makes sense. Is don't try and do a monolithic model. Consider the various aspects, consider the various levels, and see if you can pull this together in some sort of high-level coordination structure. There's probably some more I could have shared around how we've organized ourselves, but I thought this would be useful for today's presentation. And then the last slide I got, if we can move on to that. There's just some challenges. I thought I'd rack them up a little bit, and perhaps we can get into some of these in the discussion afterwards. We'll see how that goes. But on the prevent, one of the key things we're really working on is how do we get practical ongoing status measurement going. So it's fine to issue all the frameworks and so on, but how do you actually get information back around that status in a practical way? Not just a once a year reporting, not just an on-site visit, but some other ways to get that going. Coordinated shared testing, so that's one of the other things. Around the detect site, we spoke around trust around intel sharing. That is absolutely key. How do you get it real time? And how do you get the various parties involved? So how do you scale this thing across many parties without losing that trust? And we've tried some initiatives in that space, and we'll see if we can get into sharing some of those learnings a little later today. And then the last bit on respond and recover. How do you get creative in getting representative simulations going? Because it's nice to have tabletop exercises. We understand those. We've run a couple of those. But you really need to get a little more creative around how you get a representative simulation. In other words, how do you really mimic it working in real life? And I know there are areas, for instance, some of the other jurisdictions that have worked on unannounced testing and things like that. And you really got to get creative in that space. And then the last bit in the respond and recover. Remember, we spoke around those various dimensions. What is key is really to get that fraud and national structures to be included in your respond and recover. Don't just think financial sector. And like I said, what we've done there is really under that cyber resilience subcommittee. In fact, I co-chair that with the person responsible for coordinating cyber from a national perspective across our private institution. So we've even created a little bit of a co-sharing structure there, and we're really trying to get open communication going there. To make sure those national structures are included and nobody feels threatened. It really gets into a collaborative space. And that is me for today. Hopefully I didn't overrun too much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gerhard. Well, without further ado, back to over to you, Nikhil and Isham.
All right. Thank you, Dorothy and Imran. And hello, everyone. I am Hisham Libibeti. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at the Bank of Canada. And I have with me my colleague, Nikhil, who's from the Financial Stability Department. First, I just would like to thank the IMF and the World Bank for putting this event together and for giving us the opportunity to share our cybersecurity strategy, as well as our experience. I have to say, I was very impressed with all the presenters today and the discussion. It really very impressive how far we have become. We have come as a community when it comes to cyber resilience. Since we have only 15 minutes today to cover our cybersecurity strategy, as you can imagine, I'm going to stay at very high level. Our cybersecurity strategy is a public document, so it is published on our website. You can just Google cybersecurity Bank of Canada, and it's going to be the first entry coming back. So I also would like to, since we are going to be at very high level, I would encourage you, if you go through the strategy and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Nikhil. Would be more than happy to answer any of your question. Before jumping to the cybersecurity strategy itself, I just wanted to share with you our recent financial system review. It has just been published. And cybersecurity for the 6th year in a row has been highlighted as a top threat to the financial system in Canada. The respondents of the Bank Spring 2021 survey identified cyber incidents as one of their 3 risks facing the financial system, but also facing their own institution. The respondents also highlighted the fact that cyber resilience and risk management is one of the top areas that they are investing in. Just to add to this, to give you a position for how, as a Bank of Canada, we see cyber threats, our governor in 2018 was asked what keeps him up at night, and he talked about cyber threats as a #1 item that keeps him up at night. Next slide, please. So that really drove a lot of what we have been doing when it comes to our cybersecurity strategy. I have to say, when we started developing our first cybersecurity strategy late 2018, it started by us thinking maybe that's going to be just focusing on our internal cyber defense. That whole thing lasted 5 minutes, and we realized that didn't make any sense. And as a result, we ended having a cybersecurity vision that is talking about the resiliency of the entire Canadian financial system against evolving landscape. So that is the vision that we put forward in our current cybersecurity strategy. Next slide, please. So to achieve this vision, we identified 3 goals that we focus on. So the #1 goal, as you can imagine, is really about strengthening our internal cyber defense, and people is at the core of that focus, attracting and retaining a top cyber talent. If you look at our cybersecurity strategy, I'm not going to go in the details, but under that goal, you are going to see all the usual suspects, from identity and access management, endpoint protection, threat intelligence, all the stuff that we are all working on. The 3rd goal was about regulation and promoting leading cybersecurity standards, which is really based on our oversight role. For me, the most critical role, and we heard so many people talking about that, and that is also our experience, is that 2nd role. It's truly that middle gear that makes the 2 other gears turn, which is really about collaboration. That has become a key priority for us in our cybersecurity strategy. Collaboration, not just within internal to the Bank of Canada, between the different stakeholders at the bank who are looking after cybersecurity strategy, but also collaboration with our partners, whether it is government department, whether it's intelligence agencies, as well as the private sectors. That has become a key priority for us. We have made a lot of progress, and most probably during the panel discussion, we'll share more information with you on that front. With that said, next slide, please, and I will hand it over to my colleague, Nikhil.
Thank you very much, Hisham. I mean, I think the fact that Hisham and I are here kind of together presenting is really a testament to the coordination and the partnership that we've built internally in the bank on this tremendous topic of cyber. Hisham, being our CISO, obviously comes from the IT side, but I come from the financial system side. Really, I'm focused, and my team and our department really focused on the sector's resilience. And I think we're actually a really strong partnership now. Those focused on the financial sector, overseeing it, ensuring its resilience, that working collectively with our experts internally around security and information technology. It's really actually the only way, I think, to tackle this problem. And I think that's one of the reasons we're been able to have some success here in this area is through that type of internal coordination. This map here that you see on this slide really gives you the big picture of some of the broad things we were trying to accomplish from 2019 to 2021 in our strategy. I'm going to turn to the next slide and tell you a little bit more about some of those things, and we can cover more details in the panel discussion as well. The first broad objective was to strengthen overall resilience, and I think it makes sense to start from that high level, right? We have a regulatory focus on the payment clearing and settlement systems, but we really are concerned more broadly with the resilience of the entire sector. And we have a collaborative effort, which we call the Resilience of the Wholesale Payment System Initiative, to bring together the biggest banks as well as our payment system operator, not through a regulatory initiative, but through a voluntary initiative, so that we can all collectively work together and raise our resilience using benchmarking and exercises as tools to do so. And we need to continue those kind of perpetual efforts to strengthen, Canada's and global critical infrastructure. Turn to the next slide, please. How do we do that? Well, really, as Hisham said, it's through collaboration, it's through partnerships. I think of that as being internal, like I mentioned already, but of course, external with our domestic partners in Canada, as well as internationally as well. One of the things I want to highlight here is that we established a public-private group called the Canadian Financial Sector Resiliency Group to bring together the key financial authorities in Canada, as well as the key financial sector firms. And it's kind of one place where we can all share information and come together quickly in the event of a cyber incident. This is just an example of how, through partnerships, we're trying to strengthen our sector's resilience. If I could move to the next slide, please. So those first two elements I spoke about were really more high level aimed at the sector. But of course, at the central bank, we do have a specific role to oversee those financial market infrastructures, those payment clearing and settlement systems that are critical to our economy. We're a key member of CPMI IOSCO, and we play a big role there, and then we do so domestically to oversee those financial market infrastructures that are so important for our sector. A big highlight here that I want to point out is that we have worked very collaboratively with our IT department to build out what we call the expectations for cyber resilience. This is really giving a guide to our financial sector space, in particular to the entities that we regulate and oversee, a sense of what we expect from them when it comes to cyber hygiene. We already follow the high-level principles that are found in the CPMI IOSCO cyber guidance for FMIs. And this complements that publication by giving us as overseers and the entities that we oversee a true sense of what good really means to us. If I could have the next slide, please. Just before I turn back to Hisham to wrap things up, I wanted to tell you about how we're also trying to evolve how we oversee the financial sector when it comes to cybersecurity. The world is just changing so much here, and our regulatory oversight has to keep pace. Technology is just becoming increasingly integrated into payment systems, into financial market infrastructures. And so when we're thinking about the hiring that we do to support our oversight role, we have to think beyond traditional economists and financial sector specialists. We have to think about technologists, for example, being directly involved in oversight. And we have actually hired some of those types of skill sets directly into our role, where traditionally those type of players may have only been in the IT department. In addition, we work very closely with Hisham and all his team across the IT and security spaces. Together, we can tackle this problem, but individually, I don't think we can. And this is, I think, a theme that we're going to see for years to come as we try to think about how best to oversee the financial system when it comes to cybersecurity. We need to do things like training, even rotations, perhaps, from the financial system function to the IT function, so that we get some of that information sharing and knowledge transfer. We don't have all the tools, but I think if we work together, we can. That's the best way to try to bring together the most comprehensive toolkit and do the best job that we can to oversee and have a strong financial system. I'll turn back to Hisham just to wrap things up here for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikhil. And so overall, like just in closing, our current cybersecurity strategy is coming to an end by end of this year, and we started the process of refreshing the strategy. I have to say it served us really well. Overall, the vision will remain the same. The three goals actually will remain the same at very high level. We most probably will change some of the wording, but collaboration will continue to be a key element of our cybersecurity strategy moving forward. I can tell you it's very just a sign that of how far we have come. Even during the consultation, we actually of the cybersecurity, the refresh of the cybersecurity strategy, we reached out to 8 of our private sector partners to get their views of where we should actually either put more emphasis or expand the partnership. That's also a sign of this critical piece as we move to improve the resiliency of the financial sector. With that said, I'll hand it over back to Dorothy, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hisham, Nikhil, and Gerard, for your very insightful presentations. And I have to also thank Rohir for invoking my passion for Sun Tzu's Art of War. And actually, he reminded me of my favorite saying from the book, which I believe Sun Tzu wrote knowing cyber was going to come, when he said, the supreme art of war is to subdue your enemy without even fighting. So it really does seem poignant. So at this juncture, I'd like to invite Vasu and Yao back for the next panel discussion. And here I would like to turn over to Marina Moretti, who will moderate. Marina is Assistant Director and Head of Financial Supervision and Regulation Division in the Monetary and Capital Markets Department of the IMF. She oversees policy, diagnostic, and capacity development work on financial regulation and supervision, right across banking, insurance, and security sectors, working in close collaboration with international standard-setting bodies, national authorities, and other stakeholders. So I leave it here and I turn over to you, Marina, and others.
Thank you very much, Emran, and thank you to the panelists for the time for this conference in general, but also this follow-up discussion. I do realize that for some of you is very late at night, and so I appreciate even more. I thought this panel could usefully elaborate a little bit more and provide some really practical guidance on some of the key aspects of building a cyber, security capabilities in the central bank. The first area where I would like to ask a follow-up question is internal organization, and I'm gonna ask all the panelists to step in as they see fit. We saw a lot of discussion about the importance of collaboration and partnership. Takeshi mentioned the imperative of breaking down silos within central bank, and so the question from me is, how did you break down these silos? How did you sensitize your upper management to the importance of cybersecurity, and what did that result in terms of practical changes in your organization as well as internal committees? And perhaps I'm going to give the floor to our colleagues at Bank of Canada. As you said, the fact that both of you are here provides an excellent practical example of close collaboration. So why don't you take the floor, and then we will open it up to the rest of the panel.
And maybe I can start, and Nikhil, please jump in. I think that when it comes to internal collaboration, the journey of, like, your question had a few elements. So number one, improving our own internal team. It started by us doing maturity assessment. The maturity assessment was shared with the board. I have to tell you, we have come a long way when it comes to governance. So everything we do from a cybersecurity, we have something called a security committee that oversee everything we do. And we did a lot of education to the board of directors at the bank initially, and now we go to the board of directors annually to do what I call the state of cybersecurity at the bank, where we are reporting on our progress when it comes to improving our own cyber resilience, as well as the initiatives that we are doing across the financial sector. So all that governance in place that is happening at different layers. Our security committee has leaders from across the bank. So as a result, when we are actually going there, they put the corporate hat on, and that's how we make decisions. When it comes to how we broke the silos, I think there is no doubt the appointment of a bank chief information security officer. It was not the IT chief information security officer. It was positioned as the bank a chief information security officer. As a reporting of the position, not just to the CIO, but the reporting is also going to the chief operating officer to create that independence as a function. And one of the key mandates for that position when it was created is to break the silos. So that also helped a lot of actually improving the relationship with across the different function in the bank, whether it is the second line of defense, whether it's the third line of the defense, and also creating the partnership with the financial stability department. We report on all cyber activities on a regular basis to the security committee. It doesn't matter where it is happening, it gets reported. And the feedback from our colleagues in the financial stability department is critical for how we actually staff and resource moving forward. So as a result, that also helps in making sure that is a priority for us as a cyber security division. Nikhil?
Thank you, Hisham. Yes, so I'm coming from the perspective of being in our financial stability department, and I can remember the earlier days where things were much more siloed. And we made, partly through Hisham's efforts, we made a conscious decision to break those down. And that has really gotten us to where we are. One of the ways that we did that, that Hisham hasn't mentioned, which I'll also throw out there, is through the creation of a cross-department working group that meets regularly to basically bring together what we're doing on cyber all across the organization, make sure that the left and the right hands are talking, make sure that we speak with one voice on issues and not giving conflicting messages. And then that group prepares a dashboard that we present to the security committee that Hisham mentioned. So this is part of the governance that ensures we stay coordinated. That working group really is an important piece, and the dashboard reporting really is an important piece of that. So I would throw that out as another practical way that we use to break down those silos.
Thank you, Hisham and Nikhil. This was very helpful, including the governance aspects and reporting line. Let me turn to Vasu and on the experience at the RBI about how to bring forward, to build a cyber capability within the central bank and how you organize it internally.
Thank you very much. Even at the Reserve Bank of India, it's not very different from what our Bank of Canada colleagues were mentioning, because cybersecurity is a significant activity that is very religiously and followed at the very top levels. And just like what they were saying, the CISO is again nothing to do with the IT department alone. The CISO is very much part of the risk monitoring department in the bank. And the cyber hygiene within the Reserve Bank is not just the CISO or the IT department's responsibility, but it's everyone's responsibility. So we are all well geared up, and the responsibilities that we have in terms of following good cyber safe practices is very well followed up, and that's a message that is clearly laid down from the top. As I was mentioning in my presentation earlier, we moved to a risk-based supervision for monitoring all the entities that are regulated by us. And when we did so, we also took out the cyber security as a separate activity to be followed up, not just to be clubbed up with the regular risk-based analysis, be it for market or liquidity or credit or even operational risk. The cyber risk assessment has been kept separate. As I was saying, that we have an exclusive cell that has been created right in 2015. And this cell actually does a number of things, including, for example, taking up the on-site assessments, the off-site surveillance, hosts a repository wherein all the cyber incidents are all reported. These incidents are all followed up and acted upon. Then we also have the KRIs, which contain more than 90 to 100 indicators that are actively followed up, that are reported by the regulated entities. And using these KRIs, the cyber posture for each of the entities is worked out, and based on which the activity that needs to be looked at when we go on site is being assessed and taken forward. And as I also mentioned, we have set up a separate subsidiary for the information technology coordination. They take care of assisting us in the on-site assessments. And all these things, whatever assessments are made and completed, these reports are put up to the board for financial supervision. And this board is headed by the governor himself. And this board also has the other deputy governors, the central board members and experts. And they do go through the conclusions of these assessments in threadbare detail. And wherever necessary, they don't hesitate to direct enforcement action to be taken if the entities are found to be non-compliant. There were these incidents which were seen after the SWIFT global incident. There was some lack of non-compliances. There were some of the entities probably were not taking the cyber drills very seriously. So all these enforcement actions have actually put everybody on guard now. And to help these board also come out with their directions and to guide them, we have a cyber security committee that is headed by again the executive director level, what we call as assistant governor in some other organizations. And this cyber security committee also has experts from the industry in terms of forensic auditors, in terms of chartered accountants or accountants, in terms of people who are certified, such people who actually are looking at the cybersecurity activities day in and day out. And a lot of departments from within the Reserve Bank, which are all involved in this regulation and supervision and IT management, are all part of this National Cyber Committee. This is a standing committee on cyber security. And the Cyber Security Committee goes through in detail the various incidents that have happened, guides the Reserve Bank in reviewing the technology-related threats, examining what are the available standards and protocols, and advising us what intervention strategies should be there in place. And in case of, God forbid, in case there is an emergency or in case an incident that is perceived or that happens, we also have a interdepartmental cross-functional cyber crisis management group. So we can meet at very short notice, we can take remedial action, and we can have a line of thinking or discussion that is that can be quickly implemented and followed up, including, for example, if there are those actions that need to be taken in one or two incidents that have been seen, what exactly is to be done. And these things have actually given us a complete top-down support, and the top management is very much in sync with all our initiatives, and we have a lot of like scale-up mechanisms available should there be a need, and there's also a continuous reporting mechanisms for adverse incidents as well. So all in all, I feel that the attention given to cyber security, cyber resilience in the financial sector, in the entities that we regulate, as also within the RBI, is at a very, very elevated level. And it is indeed nice to see that the support is at all levels coming in from. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasu. Before moving to the next question, let me give an opportunity to Yeo Sang to add from the perspective of MIS. How do you keep your top management in sync, as Vasu put it, and how do you organize yourself to make sure that there is proper collaboration?
Yeah, thank you, Marina. Yeah, we raised the awareness of our senior management on cybersecurity matters in a number of ways. The cybersecurity team tables the quarterly updates to our board risk committee on our risk assessment of the cyber threat landscape and our management measures implemented internally and for the financial sector. And our cyber research and intel team gathers cyber threat information from key financial institutions, open and paid sources to perform analysis. The output is a monthly cyber threat indicators report for our senior management to sensitize them to the prevailing cyber threat landscape. And on a weekly basis, we also publish what we call the cyber highlights report on our intranet. And this is accessible by all employees of MAS, including senior management. And this covers the key global cyber events and the developments in bite sizes to raise awareness as well. So when management is understands cybersecurity, they are then better able to lend strong support to the cyber budget needed and to continuously upgrade, for us to continuously upgrade our security infrastructure and uplift our cyber human resources. In terms of tearing down the silo, what MAS has taken is that 2 years ago, we formed the technology group. So I used to be from the supervision side of the house, and then we have the CISO team who is responsible for the internal cyber resilience of MAS. So with the formation of the technology group under one group head, I'm now part of the technology group. And so the supervision part of the cybersecurity and the internal cyber resilience functions are sort of housed under one roof. And hence, I think that interaction actually sort of increased and a lot of the cross-learning actually happens. I was also appointed the Chief Cybersecurity Officer, and then I have the second line function to ensure that our CISO, to keep our CISO honest in a sense. So, so my interaction with the internal cyber team is also has increased. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me now move to the next layer of collaboration, which is the one with the private sector and private-public partnerships. Gerard, you spoke a lot. Your presentation was very rich in terms of what the South Africa Reserve Banks have been thinking about on putting everyone in a room, building trust. You hinted that you could give more example on how what was your experience in scaling up this collaboration. So I'd be certainly very interested in your further insights on this, as well as some indication of the balance of the initiative between the central bank and the private sector. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I think that's exactly the catch, is to get that balance in the right place. because I think we'll all recognize that this is such a complex topic that if you're going to go just enforcement and just rules-based and you don't get that collaboration and trust going, you're probably not going to get to the real details. So you really need to create that openness. So what has helped us quite a bit is really create a non-threatening environment. So in terms of sharing the power a little bit and so on. So when we set up the cyber resilience subcommittee, we had a lot of industry collaboration in the terms of reference in how we're going to chair it, how's it going to run, who's involved, and so on. So that open, transparent involvement helped a lot. Leverage existing relationships. So that really helps. That one-on-one, really getting to know the people. I think some of the other panelists also spoke around that, really that face-to-face and getting to know each other really builds that trust. So that helps a lot. So I spoke around the sharing of power. Then be willing to take up those tough discussions, because there's some things that you can't do through willing buyer, willing seller, that you really need to have the tough discussion, and you sort of introduce it at your collaboration forum. You don't need to try and enforce it from there. You got your regulatory and oversight structures already in place. You got the ability to issue guidance, directives, things like that, but really just introduce also the tough discussions in those collaboration forums, and then be totally transparent. Sort of admit where you're also struggling a little bit. Don't try and come from a position of, well, we got this figured out and we're just going to tell you what to do. In fact, most of the time we found the industry teaches us a lot. So if you can get into leveraging that and really getting to feel that they're part of that collaboration structure and they give input. And so the way we do the agenda, so some practical things, the way we do the agenda is we actually step through the various parties, and we allow them to put stuff onto the agenda, but we also get them to speak around certain things. The way we initiate work, we got work streams that are driven by people in the industry. It's not SARB leading the working group. So we got, for instance, a working group that looks at how do we do incident reporting and collaboration when it hits, how do we map these various structures. We actually got somebody out of the industry to do that and collaborate with that. And we also asked the people to come pitch their ideas as well. We had one of our FMIs actually do transaction switching and so on, and they started a great initiative around using some artificial intelligence to do cyber fraud detection. And they actually came and pitched the idea there. We didn't put a SARB wrapper on top of it. We didn't try and repackage it. We literally said, come tell it and come sell it to the people. And if we get buy-in, we're behind you. The way we want to do cyber coordination this year, for instance, is one of the, we said we'd like to do at least one simulation a year. But there's also various bodies that want to run these simulations. And we said, that's great. Let's pick one that we support officially for that year. It's not just we need to organize something from the top. Let's get somebody out of the community to say, okay, so this initiative looks great this year, because we actually found a lot of people trying to run simulations. And we actually found resources starting to clash in that space. So we have no shortage, we actually have too much. And we agreed as a group, let's formally support one of these. I mean, we can't formally cancel or formally stop people from doing it, but let's just all agree to support one of these initiatives. So those are just some practical steps to get really that industry self-organization coming to the fore. And then be careful of your language. We also got some scars. I remember one of the presentations by one of our regulating entities, and I won't name names to embarrass people, but it was really a statement that said, you know what, there's no other CSIDs but this one. You know, and the total ignoring of that sort of substructures and that networks that are running that are not formalized that you really want to tap into. So those are just some practical steps. Hopefully that helps a little.
Thank you. And let me open this question up more broadly for other interventions, and you know, including the particular initiative on cyber exercises, for instance, that you conduct with your private sector, as well as your sense of how do you deal with this issue that Gerard raised of, you know, the balance, not just between the central bank and the private sector, but also the formal versus informal initiatives, which I think is also a key issue. Who would like to jump in? Perhaps Yosang, would you like to take the floor next?
Thank you. I'll take a stab at the question. So I think we all agree that fighting the cyber war, I think individually we won't win the war, and I think we need both private sector's cooperation and collaborations, and which is why MES works very closely with the industry, especially the Association of Banks in Singapore. Standing Committee on Cybersecurity, which I mentioned in my presentation. So the members of the committees are actually CISO levels and of our local and global banks. So there is a fair bit of diversity within the group, and we encourage cross-sharing and learning between the member banks. So MES and the Cyber Committee of ABS work on various cyber projects like development of cyber guidelines, organizing cyber exercises. And we found this very useful. And because the CISOs of the banks are actually more well-resourced than other smaller types of financial institutions. So I think they actually lead the pack and lead the industry. And a lot of the work that we do with the Association of Banks actually benefited the other subsectors within the financial industry. And subsequently, we set up the insurance sector cyber committee as well, because the next more well-resourced group will be the insurance companies, right? Which has also worked very well as well. So now we have two big cyber committee, one that's run by the banks and the other one that's run by the insurers. And other private organizations that we sort of work closely and engages would be the FSI-SAC, which has set up their APAC regional headquarters in Singapore, and then we continue to work with them to actually improve the information sharing capabilities within the APAC region. Thank you.
Thank you. Nikhil, Hisham, anything to add from the Bank of Canada's perspective?
Yeah, so I can start, and again, Nikhil, please jump in. I think our collaboration with the private sector started a couple of years ago. The governor meets with CEOs of the largest bank a couple of times a year. In one of these meetings, there was a discussion about cyber resilience and the need for leadership. And there was a concern. They were discussing what if one or two banks, as a result of a cyber attack, are unable to actually do their transactions within our wholesale payment system. And they decided collectively, let's do something about it. And that's initiated the resiliency of the wholesale payment initiative for us. We went about that initiative as a coalition of the willing. So we are not really holding a stick telling them you must do that. We are going saying as a community, let us try to improve our cyber resilience. And we actually also looked that we didn't want the initiative to be too big, too bureaucratic. So we only have the 6th largest bank in Canada, as well as our payments operator, Payments Canada. We started the entire initiative by saying, hey, let's do a workshop. Let us look at how can we go about that entire initiative. And out of these workshops, we created 5 work streams. Every work stream is led by one of the big banks. And the work streams, if you look at what we're trying to do, it's really across NIST, but we are looking at the wholesale payment system. So it's effectively, we have work streams that's looking about benchmarking. So we benchmark the critical components of the wholesale payment system, and then we share with the banks the results relative to other banks. They see where they are, and they actually develop a plan how they can close the gap. We have a work stream about resiliency testing. We do 2 to 3 resiliency testing across the industry for the wholesale payment system. We simulate certain events, and we have, something like between 100 to 170 people in a room, and we go about, it's a tabletop exercise. We are doing one work stream is about recovery. What if one of the banks is hit by a cyber attack? How can they actually recover their critical data? and what would we do in the interim? So there is benchmarking. They are closing the gap that's identified from benchmarks. There is another work stream that's focused on coordination. What if we have a cyber incident across the industry? How can we actually coordinate the information and recovery from this cyber? There is the last work stream is focused on identifying the risk scenario to the wholesale payment system. So it's very specific, and actually that work stream is what drive the work that we are doing across work streams, because at the end of the day, it is risk-based. But the key component out of all these things that, as I was saying, it's a coalition of the willing. The second component that's really important, good governance. So we have an executive steering committee. It's not just the CISOs, it's also head of payments or head of technology within these big banks that quarterly meets and sees the progress that we are doing across all these work streams. We also report back to the governor and the CEOs the progress that we are making. And we are not going about it from an oversight perspective, or although that Nikhil in the background is getting some information, and sometimes he's actually feeding back some areas that he would like from an oversight perspective to poke at and get us to do deep dive. So we take that into consideration, and sometimes some of the work streams, the outcomes is back to our oversight to think about how are we going to go about that. So that's how our experience in Canada on one of the initiatives. And Nikhil, I hand it over to you.
Yes, I mean, I don't have too much more to add. Hisham covered it very nicely. I think we just have to remember, right? There are externalities in this space, right? So a cyber attack, the impact spreads beyond the victim, and that's what's driving, I think, the importance of collaboration here, right? So let's go back to the economics and remember that. And it's why we have to be able to work as a team on these issues. If you try to do it only with the stick, it never works, right? It has to be the right balance, which is a word we've been using a lot. And I think that's what we've been able to strike with this resilience of the wholesale payment system initiative. I should just mention that in the slides that we have for this event, which I know will be available after, we have two annexes in our document. One provides quite a bit more detail on the resilience of the wholesale payment system initiative that Hisham just talked about. And one slide also provides a lot more detail on our Canadian Financial Sector Resiliency Group initiative, another public-private partnership that we've brought together, which I mentioned earlier. So if you're interested, there's more details there, and Hisham and I would be happy to talk more about that. We're proud of these things, so we'd be happy to talk more about them if there was greater interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from Basu on how the RBI is driving public-private partnerships in this space, and then we will move to the next question.
Yeah, because of the enormity of the issue, there is definitely something that cannot be done by the central bank alone, and we have to have those industry parties, industry stakeholders also contributing, because we do have the CISO forum where a lot of interactions happen. The CISOs come together and they meet and they do exchange about what's happening in their own respective institutions, what they could do, what they wanted to do, but they could not do, and they try to escalate these issues to us. And as our Bank of Canada colleague was mentioning, we also have these interactions which our top management has one-to-one with the banks as well. And subsequently, when we do the assessment, there are those frequent interactions with the industry as well. And we do have a very formal and what you call unexpected or unannounced drills also that take place, and everyone has to participate in those drills. So these drills also come out with a lot of learning experiences, and these are tracked upon to see what are the learning points, how is each institution trying to upgrade. And one activity that came out during all the presentations is about the importance of the payment systems in cyber resilience in the day-to-day transactions. What we also monitor is how the banking transactions and the payment system transactions are seeing in terms of declines every day. So we monitor key systems to see whether there are any declines that are happening across major banks. What could be the reason for the declines? For example, now I might get a message which says that yes, there are these 1 or 2 banks are down and they are not able to accept your RTGS or your faster payment system messages. And we try to go back to the bank to see why it's not happening and why are the issues coming up. And what we have, one more thing, what we have done is we have told the umbrella organization that manages one of the fast payment systems to publish these declines on their website. So each bank level decline is available on the website. So the customers of these banks can make out which bank is doing better and whether they should shift the royalties in case they find that some banks are doing better than the other. So we try to educate the customers, we try to educate the banks. And obviously, one activity I did tell in my presentation that we have voluntarily taken upon ourselves is that we have gone for interoperability of all systems. So when we have interoperability, we have those large players, we have those small players participating. And as Mr. Takeshi was mentioning in his talk, endpoint security becomes extremely crucial. So we do monitor this endpoint security very well. And we have what do you call a hotline with all these entities and their technology heads, the top management, the CISOs, etc. So whenever we want, those industry level discussions also happen. Plus we have our subsidiary, which I said, they also have discussions with the business leaders of the industry, outside the industry as well, try to get what are the trends that are happening elsewhere and try to make it a learning experience. And as I was also mentioning, we have the largest fintech adoption across the globe. So we have all the big techs and fintechs that are participating in our ecosystem. So they also throw a lot of competition to the traditional banks and each one learns from the other and tries to improve themselves. So it's a very interesting collaboration and equation that we are witnessing now, and all for the better of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me move to the next topic, which is capacity development. That's clearly an area that is of great focus for the IMF and certainly our colleagues at the World Bank as well. And it's an area that has been identified by many central banks as a challenge that they're trying to address. If you don't mind, Vasu, I'll start with you this time. I was very interested in hearing you mention an initiative by the RBI, a subsidiary that focuses on research and development, but also capacity buildings. And perhaps if you could spend a few minutes just letting us know a little bit more how about that particular initiative and any other that the RBI might be organizing.
Yeah, the subsidiaries have been greatly helping us to build the capacity in terms of the certification programs, in terms of providing training to the top management, to the other employees in these institutions, conducting various drills, helping the institutions, like whenever they come out with their applications for mobile phones or even for the internet banking, etc., having those testings happen. And what we also have been seeing is that we also collaborate heavily with the governmental agencies. We have the CERT-In, of course, CERT India, and we also have the National Critical Information Infrastructure Identification Center, Protection Center, NCIIPC. So they also have identified lots of systems that are classified as protected systems. They are published, and a lot of interactions happen between the owners of these systems and these governmental agencies. And what happens is that we do get a lot of logs and other information about what's happening to the industry in terms of, say, some suspect attacks from other jurisdictions, where are all the IPs coming in from. So a lot of threat information do come in. One thing we want to help or we want to see is about how to reduce the false positives, because many of these instances are actually typically coming out as false positives. So how to do that? But this also involves the institutions to have their own capacities to have a SOC, SOX, and then try to monitor them, try to check from where they are coming. Because India is one jurisdiction where a lot of concerns are there from various other state actors. We have those KYC issues, we have AML concerns. So it does become very important for every stakeholder in the ecosystem to be part of it. So capacity becomes so important that we have now said that certification program should be there. Internally also, we have lots of activities that are necessary for each of our inspectors, supervisors, other people to undergo certifications, even have a lot of courses that are conducted. Some of them are focused, some of them are intense, some of them are general, but everybody has to undergo many of the certifications. And people are also encouraged to have private certifications as well. And one thing we do is that for some of these supervision related activities, we do advertise internally, because RBI is one institution which attracts the best of talent in the country. But we are a general organization in the sense that we do see multiple departments in our career in the bank. So I have been a supervisor earlier. Now I look after payment systems. So I do change my duties, and everybody does. But what we do is that for these critical activities like information technology, cyber security, etc., we do have advertisements within the bank. People who are interested can come and apply, and they do get a longer term to stay within this particular activity. Even in the department I am in, so we do advertise people to come in for the fintech related segments. And we say that if the normal tenure in a department could be 5 years, here they could stay for say 5 to 7 years or more time. So depending on that, the capacity building happens, and it's always a question of self-interest. So we do see people who are picking up these activities on their own. So we do encourage them. So within a organization that is typically what you call hierarchical or governmental, we do try to encourage such type of initiatives, and that's how we have been able to successfully manage our ecosystem. And let me tell you honestly, we are one of the largest, we are the largest country in the world in terms of daily payment transactions, in terms of the number of transactions that happen in all systems. But we have been touched wood managing the last couple of months, years, etc., without any major incidents. So that's all thanks to the team that is there, thanks to the capacity building that has happened. So these are some of the challenges, but we can't sit quiet. So these challenges need to be always like faced whenever, like for example, I have said we have gone around with our 24/7 by 365 systems. So if some of the incidents do come to us to light in the dead of the night, or sometimes on a weekend when there are large holidays, etc. So we do have to put the banks to put some resources in all these activities throughout the year. So that's a challenge. And many of the entities that we supervise are also in the public sector. So to make them undertake all these things without what you call monetary compensation becomes a challenge. But still, we are taking care of this as a public good infrastructure, and that's how things are working out well. Touch wood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I can turn to Gerhard and to get, if you could let us know a little bit how you go in South Africa about building capacity. What are your key challenges and capacity at the central bank and the supervisory authorities, as well as how you go about fostering initiatives to build capacities in the private sector?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And I think one we all struggle with. So I don't think I'm going to try and tackle the idea of attracting, developing, retaining talent internal. It's a complex problem. We're all working on it. There's certainly a lot of initiatives in the SARB in that space, but we kind of get that, right? We get out to work with talent and try and get them in, and it's a challenge. So let's just put it out there. Maybe some of the things that we've tried to do a little bit is internally, that collaboration idea. So the idea that we can work on each other's problems without needing to move people in departments or formally have to develop rotation programs or secondments or whatever, just that mere working together. So if you get your internal collaboration going well, you can leverage your resources a lot better. And I think our Canadian colleagues has sort of illustrated that with the CISO role being very close to your oversight role. And that's a key part of it. Then we also saw some of that behavior in our industries, because our sectors have sort of self-organized them well already. We already found with commercial banks, for instance, when a big incident hits and they need, for instance, a lot of Windows forensics, that there's one bank that's particularly well skilled in that space, and that they were willing to help across. So if you can get that idea of let's all work together when something goes wrong, or even before it goes wrong, that helps a lot in terms of capacity. So that is in essence the coordination discussion we've had. But one of the ideas I've been toying with and speaking to our national structures a little bit is can you formalize some of that a little bit? So can you pre-incident already have some sort of agreement when it hits that we kind of help each other out, and these guys will provide that, and so I'm thinking about formalizing that goodwill and seeing if you can leverage even a little bit more when you do that. And then the last idea that we're still working on, so we certainly haven't solved this, we're actually only trying to explore it now really, is can you combine some of the efforts around especially your monitoring and detection and things like that? So can you start to build those technology interfaces that really helps you to leverage that collaboration? And so this is beyond just building a MISP. This is beyond just sharing that internal threat info. Is can you really build that systems that make you actively work together? And we're in the infancy stages of that. So the ideas around the tech is, can you already share some network traffic stats and see if you can have some combined detection idea going there. And then one of the other ideas we spoke around is if you can get one of these rich collaboration platforms that actually help you do things like workbench analysis, tackling the incident, collaboration around that. If you can really set up some of that structures that just enable you to work on a problem together when it hits, I think that'll help a lot. So short answer, we're still trying to solve the problem just like everybody else, but that's some of the things we've tried and are trying. Thanks.
I think that's a very interesting set of ideas on using collaboration, and you insisted so much on it in the course of your intervention, but also using collaboration as a way of building capacity in a sort of, a collective fashion. I think that's very useful. I am conscious of time. We have 6 more minutes, but I just said this is such an important topic that I wanted to give an opportunity to our colleagues at MAS and Bank of Canada to jump in, and then we're going to have one more question, a quick question.
I can really quickly just point at a few things that when it comes to capacities that worked really well for us. We run a student at the internal side. We run a student program and the recent grad program. And I have to tell you, over the past couple of years, it's one of a great way to actually build these cyber talents. So we have about every year we hire 6 recent grads, and we just send them across the different teams, and they have been great for us from a pipeline perspective. On the research and development, we also partner with universities. We just finished a pilot about having some kind of a collaboration with one of the universities. We built a prototype using AI to process threat intelligence and help our SOCs. That's also has been. And I just would like to touch on the points that Gerard just mentioned about this thing about expanding what we do in cyber to other teams. A couple of like a year ago, I was visiting Microsoft Cyber Defense Center, and I was really impressed with how they are actually their security monitoring is being expanded to be embedded other skill sets from other different teams. And we thought that that's a brilliant way to, because at the end of the day, we just don't have enough people to do some of the tasks, but by tapping into some of these existing resources in other IT departments or as well as the business, you can actually get additional capacities that, and it's actually some of these talents that exist outside the cyber team. They have expertise that we don't even have. So it's not only it provides additional capacity, it's a skill set that is very difficult for us to acquire. So that is also something that we are prototyping to tap into this additional capacity. Nikhil, anything you would like to add?
In the financial system area, what we are trying to do is increase our technology expertise, right? We're financial system experts, we're economists. We don't typically have the technology training or background, but that's something now we're trying to develop through training and hiring. And similarly, we want our technology partners in the Bank of Canada, the central bank, who work with us to grow their knowledge of payments, to grow their knowledge of market infrastructures and how the financial system works. And that's happening as well through some of our collaboration. So we're kind of each learning each other's, side of the coin, but collectively that makes us better able to perform our jobs. So that's just another thing I'd like to throw in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yosang, from the perspective of MAS.
Sure. I think this topic on capacity building really resonates with me a lot. And I would consider capacity building knowledge, skill sets to be the most important components in cyber resilience in any organizations. We can have the state-of-the-art cyber tools, cyber systems, but I think will be of little use if we do not have good people to configure them, to maintain them, and to be able to respond to cyber incidents when they occur. So, and I must say that there is a dearth of good cyber professionals in the market currently, as many firms are fighting for a small pool of resources. And so we have financial institutions poaching from MEAS as well, So I'm sure the other central banks and regulators have the same problems. So we take 2 approaches to enhance the bench strength by recruiting mid-career professionals from the industry. And of course, as well as taking in fresh graduates. who are passionate in pursuing the cyber career, and we give them training and exposure. And I think central banks and regulators can offer our cyber employees tremendous exposure, I think, due to the strategic work that we do and our special vantage point. We supervise the institutions, and we can get a lot of information from the institution that we supervise. So this is about building bench strength within MAS, and also for the industry. We also try to scout for good organizations and good certification framework. For example, I think the UK, they have the CREST certification for pen testers, and we thought that was very useful, and we brought it to Singapore so that there's a chapter here to certify the pen testers in Singapore. Then we have the cyber grant. MAS actually administered a cyber grant, and we actually fund cyber projects by financial institutions, which are good. We assess to be good and can bring in capabilities to Singapore financial sector, and we do co-fund some of these projects. And we conduct study trips to countries which are actually good in cyber, and then to bring back the know-how to be infused into our financial sector. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time, the last topic, the last but not least topic, was strengthening international collaboration. We have run out of time, but I still would like to take a last round and ask you, what is your one top priority? If you were to strengthen international cooperation, what would be your top priority? And any comments that you may have on how the IMF and World Bank can be of help. And I'll go in the order of the screen. Nikhil?
Okay, a tough question always, but an important one. And I think one thing to keep in mind, and again, I think it comes back to this point about an externality here, right? That there's sort of a public good from the resilience that's out there broadly in the community, both domestically and internationally. So let's remember that as a starting point, that it is valuable, right, to try to promote resilience across the globe. In Canada, we work closely in the G7 and CPMI IOSCO and the WGCR working group of CPMI IOSCO, the BIS, of course, with IMF, World Bank. So we're involved in all of that. I just wonder, are there ways we can broaden knowledge to a larger group? And I think this type of event is exactly what you're trying to achieve. So I would commend you for trying to do this. I mean, one of the things we're thinking about in Canada is we have the public-private partnerships that focus on the smaller players. The same concept applies there. Can we that focus on the larger players, excuse me, the same concept applies. Can we broaden the knowledge out to the periphery, right? And so we're thinking about that domestically. We should be thinking about that same concept internationally as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and that's certainly an area where both IMF and World Bank are squarely focused on. Anyone else who wishes to share their top priority on international collaboration?
I think I can take a stab at it.
Okay,
just a quick
great.
one. I think having a very harmonized set of baseline cybersecurity guidelines or standards would be very useful. And I think the international standard setting bodies actually play a very important role in setting all these standards, which and I do recognize that World Bank and IMF play also a very active role in participating in all these discussions and giving very valuable feedback. So, and of course, and hosting such events like FIGI symposium is really very useful in raising awareness and sensitizing the broader community to the increasing cyber threats and coming up with collective solutions. So I commend World Bank and IMF to continue to pursue this line of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoseng. Unless there are more insights to share. Oh, Vasu, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the IMF and the World Bank have the benefit of interacting with a number of countries in different continents extensively and intensively as well. And as part of the financial sector assessment programs, they do have a lot of interactions with all the financial sector regulators, with the governments. So what they can do, I feel, is to start focusing more on the cyber resilience and cyber preparedness, also share the best practices, and maybe help, as my earlier colleagues have said, maybe preparing a toolkit which can be used to measure ourselves or benchmark ourselves vis-a-vis other practices. So I feel that will be extremely useful, because as we have more sessions like these, we get to know that there is so much more to do. Probably some of our neighbors are doing better, or probably we can share some of our practices better. But I feel you are all best pitched to take care of this responsibility and help us all in having a harmonized approach. Because as we are getting into the cross-border payments as the agenda, as the G20 has said, there will be a lot of international cooperation, a lot of exchange of systems and interlinking. So it is very necessary for us to have a good cyber resilience regime, hygiene, preparedness, readiness, etc. I feel you are best positioned to contribute in this.
And I very much thank you for that, which is very much aligned with our priorities going forward. I'll stop here. I see that Jean has been there for some time. We went 5 minutes over. I hope it's not too bad. Thank you very much again to the panelists. This has been a very enriching discussion.
Thank you very much, Marina.
Oh, good, Dorothy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marina, and thank you, panelists, for your passion, which makes me very optimistic about the future, despite the bleak picture of the threat landscape. I just would like to shortly introduce Jean, who will give our concluding remarks for the session today. Jean Pem is the Global Director in the Finance, Competitiveness and Innovation Global Practice at the World Bank. Jean leads the work to promote the development of sound, stable, sustainable and inclusive financial systems. His global team of experts works with government and partners to make financial system more resilient, to open access to finance for poor and vulnerable people, and to support economic activity. So I'll stop here. Jean, over to you. And after your concluding remarks, I'll just have a couple of housekeeping announcements. Thank you. Over to you, Jean.
Thank you very much, Dorothée. Thank you very much, Marina. And I was glad to be able to attend the end of the panel, because I learned a lot. So thank you very much to the panelists and to Marina. So distinguished speakers, panelists, distinguished audience, it's really a pleasure to join you on what is really becoming a top priority for all of us. I mean, I think you alluded to some of the numbers. Cyber risk is becoming one of the most important risks to the financial sector today. This is not theoretical. We have too much evidence of actual breaches of cybersecurity. And obviously, this has also grown with COVID-19 and the necessity to digitize business operation and processes. The FBI reported a 300% increase in reported cybercrime in April 2020. In March alone, ransomware attacks increased by 148%. Between February and April 2020, phishing was up 600%. And in April, Google blocked more than 18 million COVID-related phishing emails each day. Cybersecurity Venture estimates that the global economic cybercrime costs will grow 15% per year over the next 5 years, reaching 10.5 trillion annually by 2025. In 2021 only, the number is expected to be 6 trillion, which is up from 3 trillion in 2015. So this is really very significant. So in response to that, building cyber resilience in the financial sector is and must be a key priority for regulators. And I'm glad to see such a huge audience today. And as some of the panelists mentioned, sharing information, sharing knowledge, benchmarking is extremely important. And thank you very much for having given us the time to share your knowledge and experience in that respect. And we are very happy to partner with our friend at the IMF and join forces to co-organize and co-host this event. As you have heard from the threat landscape, not actively tackling the issue of cybersecurity is not an option. Having the eyes open on risk is not being defeatist, it's actually quite the opposite. And as the discussion this morning has shown, it is possible to build expertise, preparedness, and resilience. So maybe a couple of key takeaways from this session. And the first one is to be proactive, to get started whatever your starting point may be, and to learn from other central banks, including to avoid some of their earlier mistakes and to share knowledge and information. I think we can leapfrog cybersecurity like we have seen in many countries leapfrogging digital payment. Now, maybe 4 things on which to put a bit of stress and which I think were really highlighted by the panelists. First is that senior management must commit. Mobilize the senior management in bank, financial services provider, but also within your own central bank. Second, coordination and collaboration are key. There is no surprise that the cybercriminal world is advancing at a very fast pace. They are using automation, artificial intelligence. They are also collaborating in order to create synergies for a better exploitation of weaknesses as fast and as gainfully as possible. So we need to react to their own capacity to collaborate by collaborating ourselves. And to do that, all the authorities fighting cyber criminal in the financial sector must collaborate. This is not constrained by national border, especially in the financial sector, and this cannot be controlled or mitigated by authorities working in isolation. So obviously, each central bank needs to do its work, but this includes also associated with others in international fora, working with other countries, build regional alliances, MOUs, building alliances against a common threat. As discussed, collaboration and coordination are paramount. This is not an IT security issue. It's a financial stability issue. It's a banking supervision issue. It's a payment system issue. And it's also a financial inclusion one. And cyber resilience encompasses legal, governance, technical, operational, and HR dimension. It does require coordination and collaboration within an institution, between authorities, and obviously, very important, between the public and the private sector. Fourth message, financial sector authorities don't have to do everything themselves. They can encourage the industry to develop effective solutions for the market. All are welcome and actually called upon to contribute as long as there is coordination, collaboration, and communication. There is so much work to be done to build capacity and crisis preparedness. The growing consensus that cyber risk is a major risk to financial stability and the development of the financial sector is very welcome and needs to be built upon. So there are recommendations and guidance of international standard setting bodies, the FSB, Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, CPMI, IOSCO. The bank and the fund are also trying to increase attention to these issues and also to dedicate resources to be able to assist countries to build their own cyber resilience capacity through technical assistance using the FSAP and obviously knowledge sharing as today's event. Inside the bank, we're also trying to coalesce around several sectors collaborating to address the issue of cybersecurity. Our financial sector expertise and our community of practice are working in particular with our digital development colleagues to develop a tool to assess the cyber capability maturity of given sectors rapidly and systematically, and then use this sector assessment to derive constructive, actionable guidance for long-term cybersecurity maturity improvement. And this, we will continue to use that in particular on diagnostic, including the FSAP. And similar tools are developed with other sectors like earth, energy, and water supply. So we are really also trying to do a 360 approach to all of this. And as financial sector team, we are already assisting countries like Tunisia, Madagascar, Cambodia to assess their cyber resilience of some critical financial market infrastructure and develop their capability on cyber, both on IT security, but also regulation policies for cybersecurity in the financial sector. And obviously, we are all coordinating and collaborating with the fund in that respect. So we stand ready to support country authorities and bring to bear convening, technical assistance, and financing to help raising awareness, facilitating sharing of information, intelligence, and best practices, and obviously to build capability and strengthening the institutional arrangement. And we know that the IMF is acting in the same way, and we are really actively collaborating in this space. So thank you very much for joining us today. This is a really important discussion. I'm very happy to see that the FIGI platform has been mobilized to be able to continue that important conversation, share knowledge and experience, and we look forward to future workshops, in-country work, and other pathways to enhance our global collaboration. Thank you very much for having me this morning, and I wish the best to everybody, and thank you to the panelists and all the speakers. Back to you, Dorothée.
Thank you very much, Jean, and thank you for staying with us through this long and intense session. Please kindly provide your feedback on the session through the pop-up window. And the next session of FIGI will be on Thursday, June 17, on FinTech for Inclusion, Banking the Unbanked through International Remittances from Banknotes to Bytes. The session will explore how digitizing of remittances, accelerated by COVID-19, can increase financial access and inclusion, and how the G20 roadmap on enhancing cross-border payments can support this development. Again, thank you very much. Thank you to my co-host Emran, to the IMF and the World Bank team who enabled this event. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.